Hi, this is Jeff with Jailbreak Movies. Today we're going to talk about Tawkon, which is a mobile app that's available in Cydia. It helps you to measure the radiation levels of your iPhone that the iPhone is emitting. So we're going to talk with the CEO of Tawkon today, Gil Friedlander. Gil, so you're this big-time mobile phone user, but you say that something recently kind of dampened your mobile euphoria. You started hearing reports, studies, and theories about mobile phone radiation. Now, all of us have heard these reports, let's be honest, but what is it that exactly drove you? What is it that actually drove you to want to do something about that?
Hey, hi Jeff. It's great to be here today with you. So you're right. I'm an avid mobile phone user, using it for many years, and these reports started coming in. And it always kind of intrigued me that on your phone you can see the bars of reception, but you can't see the bars of transmission. And we all know that this phone receives signals and emits signals, but somehow we're missing as users the information about the level of transmission that the phone emits or how much we're exposed to that radiation. And that started me investigating this area, and I saw that there's actually no solution for that. And as I read the reports and initial findings about potential harm of mobile radiation, I thought that we really deserve the knowledge and the ability to know when we're exposed to high radiation and when to low. I will say quite straightforward that science is not conclusive about the impact of non-ionizing radiation or mobile radiation on our health, but there are initial indications and some research that are showing these possible health impacts. And it's probably, at this point of time, wise to take precautionary measures to try to minimize radiation before it can be too late.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Now, what your app says, it says it provides real-time tools to avoid radiation before we dial, and that's the prediction mode of the app, and then while we're talking in the call mode. That's a quote from your website. Can you explain a little bit how that's possible?
So let's start with what happens with the app before you're on a call. So you can use the app and monitor your environment. You can go with the app to every room in your house or apartment and see if that room, your phone is emitting low, moderate, or high radiation. And before you make a call, you could look and see what is going to be the level of radiation if you make a call under the current terms. During the call, we're running in the background all the time, and once we detect that your radiation or your exposure to radiation is high, we'll provide you an alert, a vibration or some kind of tone, and you can ignore it. But if you look at the screen, we'll provide you some suggestion and advice of how to continue the call, as our company name implies, talk on, but do it responsibly and smart and minimize your exposure to radiation.
That sounds great. Now, how do you respond to your critics, though? How do you respond to those who get, worked up over it? How do you respond to people who claim that cell phone radiation is no big deal, it's minimal, and that it's really nothing to get overly concerned about?
First, I think as intelligent users, each user has the right to make his own choice and decide for themselves if this is something that he has interest, concern, and wants to take any action addressing this. And unfortunately, Apple did not provide this opportunity to their users via the App Store. But I think, and it's not my personal view at this point, you see in many countries around the world that health bodies are saying to undertake precautionary measures because there are enough indications out there that there's possible harm. The research, until it will be conclusive, will take many years, and it may be laced to a whole generation. So I think it's wise. Personally, that's my feeling, and our extensive install base probably supports this, that people prefer at this point to be aware when the radiation is high, when their exposure is high, and when it's low. And there are also very simple action items to do to avoid it. So it's not like cigarettes that you need to quit smoking, but here, changing the posture of your phone from horizontal to vertical can increase dramatically your exposure to radiation. In moving a few feet away to the other side of the room, the radiation at that corner that you're exposed to could be much lower. So there are very simple things that you can do once you have the knowledge about your exposure to mobile radiation.
Right. Now that's great because you're giving users a choice of whether or not, at least we can be informed about whether or not we're exposed overly to radiation. Now, obviously, I noticed I use the app on my phone. Here it is right here. And I noticed that doing the so-called death grip on the phone increases the radiation amount that's reported. It gives you more of a chance to enter the red zone on this app, which denotes an increased level of radiation. What other factors? I know you mentioned the position that you're in, maybe a residence or the way you hold the phone, but what other factors could possibly increase radiation?
So there are many factors. I would say that probably the key one is the level of reception. So if you're getting a poor signal, the phone will emit more radiation. And if you're in a basement or in a room which has thick concrete walls, the phone will have to work much harder to reach the tower, and therefore you'll be exposed to higher radiation. By the way, what you mentioned about the death grip in the iPhone 4, the moment you perform this, not only you're losing reception, but now the phone emits more signals, so you're exposed to more radiation. But it's not all about that. You can be in a situation where you have 5 bars of reception, so perfect reception, but because now the cell is congested, the phone will get commands from the network to increase the signal. So even in a 5-bar situation, you can be exposed to relatively high levels of radiation.
Right, and I actually noticed that. It doesn't, you can't really go by the amount of bars that are on your phone, because I noticed when I had low bars, I had no radiation at one point in time, and then when I had a lot of bars, still the radiation was quite high. So this is a great app to really, discern what type of radiation levels you're exposing yourself to.
Perfect. And I would add another thing. We find that in urban areas, 80%, 90% of the time, the app will show you that you're in green and provide you the level of comfort that you're exposed to low levels of radiation. About 10, 15% of the time, you'll be in the red zone of our application. But what we see as well, that moving from green to red, the level of radiation increases by 200 times. So avoiding 1 minute of radiation in red is equivalent to 3 hours of radiation in the green zone, which is quite substantial. So knowing this information has a great impact about your exposure to non-ionizing radiation.
Right. Now, I noticed we talked about the death grip, and I know that's not just exclusive to iPhones. Believe it or not, the BlackBerry suffers from the same thing, maybe Nokia phones as well. So do you have this app available on other platforms?
Yeah, so we initially tried to launch it over a year ago, in March last year, for the iPhone, and have been rejected, claiming that it will create confusion with the users. And following that rejection, the media covered this rejection. We got a lot of exposure. And about a week later, we got contacted by Apple, and we started very constructive discussions with Apple addressing this app, and it led to me traveling to Cupertino, meeting with Philip Shoemaker there, and at the time Apple was very positive, said they have nothing to hide. We got great compliments from them about our graphical user interface, but the reason was that we were using non-documented APIs and not part of the SDK, and they were not willing to do any exception for us, and we were waiting for them to add these APIs to the SDK. Unfortunately, this took a while. My personal take that once they launched the iPhone 4 and the death grip, they kind of lost interest with this kind of application, and the communication was ceased. 2 months later, we launched it on BlackBerry, and RIM approved the application in relatively executive levels. Address this, and since then we're being sold for $10 one time to download the free on BlackBerry, and in the end of September we launched it on Android. Our next platform is going to be Symbian Nokia, not really popular in the US, and followed by Windows Phone 7.
Awesome. So you had some good dialogue with Philip Shoemaker. and he's the head honcho at Director of Applications Technology at Apple. So you were pretty high up in your communication. But then you reach out to Steve Jobs. Now, that's an interesting story. What happened when you reached out to Steve Jobs there?